Welcome to Healing Wisdom, a Thursday morning talk show featuring guests sharing their stories and knowledge. We discuss the healing aspects of the arts, metaphysics, social justice, and adventure through all types of terrain. So join me, Pandora Peoples, here on WOMR 92.1 FM in Provincetown and WFMR 91.3 FM in Orleans. We're streaming worldwide at WOMR.org. Our theme music is provided by Mason. You can find her website at masonmusic.com. That's MAESYN. Thank you, Marc Berger, for being with us today. We're going to be talking about the album Ride that you just released recently and also the new album you're working on. So you have a lot going on, and I really appreciate your album and the kind of country, Americana, American West theme. Can you talk about Ride, what inspired it, and what it's all about?
Sure. I often say that if I grew up out in the West, in the mountain or desert West, I would have never made this album because it would have all been very normal to me. Do you know? But I'm a New York guy. I lived most of my adult life in Manhattan, grew up in New York, and I was actually about to start law school, and a friend of mine and I just decided to just, hit the road, have a summer vacation, to drive across the United States, see the sights out west. Just on a kind of a lark, chase girls across America was the concept. We were 21 years old and nuts, wild, and so it was the shock of the place, the shock of it. It was a really exhilarating trip where we were kind of everywhere for 5 minutes with our eyes bugging out of our heads. Like I remember one night we got to the Grand Canyon, there were no campsites. We said, screw it, let's go to Yosemite. It was that kind of a trip, and we just drove through the Mojave Desert trying not to kill ourselves. And then 2 days later, we're in Yellowstone Park. And then we're like, come on, we can't go back to New York City without seeing the Grand Canyon. So we just drove from Wyoming to Arizona. And it was like treating the West like a Milton Bradley game. I came back and I started a law school, and it was just immediately apparent to me that something had changed because all I wanted to do was get back out there. And so for the next 5 summers, I chose one destination in the West, and I drove alone from 24th Street and 9th Avenue in Manhattan across the United States to that destination in the West. And this is before there were cell phones, so that drive isn't possible anymore. And it just became kind of a lifelong obsession. Me became kind of an aggressive mountain climber and wanting to get into the most remote places I could in the West. And I lived in Manhattan, so I felt like I saw enough people. I didn't really care if I went to Paris. I just wanted to, so whenever I had time, I wanted to be out there. And it became, like I said, I had these two, I got signed to a publishing deal right after I passed the bar. And then I had a chance encounter with Richie Havens, who began to do a song of mine, and my life kind of went a different way. But I was still consistently getting into the West. And eventually these things came together when I decided to make an album that reflected my connection to this kind of mythological subject, right?
Yeah, mythological. Can you expound on that? I love the Grand Canyon is gorgeous, and it has a very intense feeling. I think a lot of Utah, the rock formations,
Southern Utah, southeastern Utah,
and Arizona too to some extent, but definitely like that I've seen. But the rock formations are powerful. I do believe that there's a feeling of place that is for me, it's a very spiritual experience. The vibration, the frequency, the something that you can't really put your finger on.
Yeah, and the thing that, like you mentioned, southeastern Utah, which is my favorite place. It's like when you go to the Grand Canyon, of course, it's awe-inspiring if you stand on the North Rim or the Grand Canyon, but no matter where you grew up, you knew that existed before you got there. You go to southeastern Utah and you start walking into that environment, and you're consistently confronted by things that you're looking at that you didn't think anything on this planet looked like. And so I agree with the word spiritual for a description of it. And when I refer to it as a mythological subject, I think that that the United States has pretty much contributed to major themes to the world. One being the American Revolution, the founding of this country, democracy, and something that was a brand new thing that ever was before. But the other one is the American West. And that is a super resonant, sexy. I mean, it's like all over the world, people are attracted to it because I think it embraces human yearnings that doesn't matter where you're from, everybody has, which is a desire for space and the ability to hear yourself think and breathe and having time and looking out at the Western horizon and being able to imagine tomorrow's going to be better than yesterday. There's all these romantic concepts that are wrapped up in the subject of the West. So yeah, it's always been attractive to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole like pioneer and cowboy kind of thing, and there's also the whole just going west to get away from the past, make a new life for yourself and really define yourself in a different way. And
you're hitting on all my touchstones. I mean, there's a book that really inspired this album, and it's called The Big Sky. It's by a guy named A.B. Guthrie. Mm-hmm. And the characters in The Big Sky are the first white guys that went out west. This is before the pioneers, before the settlers. These were people who simply couldn't function in society or having anybody tell them what to do, and they just bolted and they headed west and kept going, and they wound up as beaver trappers living a very difficult, rugged existence with the native populations. And at the time of The Big Sky of this book, the very first pioneers are showing up, and these guys are looking at them and looking at this, and they're going, it's over. It's over. It's like, what a perspective, It's over. This like amazing wildlife lifestyle that we have out here is going to be gone. And when we think about where we're sitting today, but to imagine have that perspective at any time, like when the first pioneers show up and these guys are going, stick a fork in it.
Used to be silent, used to be open, used to be romance and life on the plains. Now it's Exxons and Kmart's, Best Westerns, McDonald's, and my cattle graze on the big missile range. Ride, get along, little dogs. Ride, so gold in the sun. Yippee-yi, boys, hear the dinner bell ring. Get along, little doggy, for days about done. Find the campfire, can't find the kettle, can't find my harp or my steel string guitar. When I turn off my headlights and gaze at the heavens, see satellites pass between Venus and Mars. Ride, get along, little dog. Ride, so gold in the sun. Yippee-yi, boy, hear the dinner bell ring. Get along. Treetops are fading, turnpikes are opening, but somehow it just ain't the same as before. Birds up in the morning in search of the dawn, and there's no time for a ride round here anymore. Ride, ride, get along, little dog. Ride, ride, so gold in the sun. We're a long way from the wide open space. Get along, little doggies, for the day's about done. Get along, little doggies, for the West, it is one.
We just heard the title track from Marc Berger's album Ride. My sense from what I've read historically is that there were a lot of French folks who were getting along with the natives before a lot of English folks arrived. But I know this is also true of other European folks as well. That
It was a mix.
Generally, fur trappers who came from Europe learned from native people how to honor and use, and just there was more of an incentive to utilize, I think. Of course, there was abundance, but I think it's just kind of it's so counterintuitive unless you're just in a mindset of conquering. You know what I mean? Unless you're fearful of animals and the buffalo and wanting to and feeling the need to mark your territory. Okay, so your new album, you're working with Dylan's bassist on this?
That's correct, Tony Garnier.
Want to talk about that?
Yeah, Ride took a lot of years to make because I knew the recordings needed to be very visual because of the subject. And I didn't know how to communicate that to an engineer, and I didn't know how to do it myself. And so we had to put a studio together and eventually I really didn't even perform for years while we were making that album and really had no idea if anybody would like it. Just trying to make great art or please ourselves and do everything we could to say as much as we could about what we wanted to say about this subject. And it came out and it got, excellent reviews, and Starbucks licensed it. And then people started saying to me, well, now people know you for this like Western thing. So now you got to make Son of Ride. That's got to be your next deal, But I have nothing more to say on this subject. But what I really enjoyed and I found challenging as an artist was rather than just here's an album with 10 of my songs, with Ride, the idea was to take you on a trip, through the entire subject of the West, where the songs are connected by this concept. And the songs are all very different one from the other, but they all have that connection to a subject. So I wanted to do that again. And there's been a subject that's interested in me my whole life, which has to do with what do the words folk music mean? And, for some people, I'm so sensitive. I love my guitar, and so I've always had an interest in that term and what qualifies as it. And I made an album with a concept again, and it's very genre bending, and it traces back to the first American artist, and that was Walt Whitman. Before Walt Whitman, there's no idea. Everybody's idea of an artist still comes from Europe, and so that's what the model is. And Emerson had been calling for the American poet to appear, and Whitman responded to that by producing this slender volume of poems in 1855 called Leaves of Grass. But there's a preface before the poems where he describes for the first time an American artist. He calls it the American poet. One of the things he says is the attitude of the greatest poet to horrify despots and cheer up slaves. It is the attitude of the greatest poet to horrify despots and cheer up slaves. And so for me, I was like, well, you know what? For my album, I'm going to if it does that, I'm calling it folk music. I don't care if it's a punk band or a guy with an acoustic guitar. So a lot of this album is fairly aggressive rock. And then there's the ballad that Richie Havens did in his concerts for many years, but it's a very eclectic album, but it's all subversive. It all horrifies. It's all directed at despots, and it's all for the purpose of cheering up slaves.
This is Pink Cows off of your forthcoming folk album.
Pink cows by the side of the road. Pink cows, you're gonna see them in the movies. Cows, I love the way that they walk in their itty bitty pitty pat booties. Pink cows got the video game. Pink cows getting funky with the donkeys. Cows, I love the way that they walk in their itty bitty pitty pat booties. Now some people say that I'm alright. Some even claim to care. Some people wanna shut my mouth. I tell them they can smell my chair. Pink cows, it's a dip and a curl. Pink cows, and you ain't hallucinating. Cows, I love the way that they walk in their itty bitty bitty patter booties. Now some people say, Mark, you're all right. Some even claim to care. Some people wanna shut my mouth. I tell them they can smell my chair. Pink cows, got you ditching the sauce. Pink cows, we're gonna keep it in the family. Cows, I love the way that they walk in their itty bitty bitty patter booties. Way up in Canada too. I love the way that they walk.
Well, I'm definitely, given the time it took to make Ride, I'm kind of a sell no wine before it's time type of dude, you know. But I think early winter 23, it should be done. 3 of the songs are mixed already. I need to find an artist who can create this record cover, which has been a misery trying to find. I'm looking for something that replicates a Renaissance tapestry with a woman on a balcony looking at a minstrel in a clearing to give you a really false idea of what's inside this album, you know? And I haven't been able to find the artist who can do that for me yet. We may have to go in another direction.
Well, I like that your folk is defined by this theme. Walt Whitman was a wonderful poet, and of course his poetry lives on, so we can talk about him as though he is ever present. But my sense of him, because was that he was palling around with Thoreau and Hawthorne, and therefore that he was involved in abolition, or at least transcendentalism, which were kind of linked at their outset. Is that true? Was he a spirit?
I mean, if you read Walt, to me, people talk about this guy, his history before he wrote Leaves of Grass. There's just nothing in his life to foreshadow the possibility that this guy could create something like this. And so there are people who have written about him as if he was in some trance like Buddha, and this just happened. And you can read things in Song of Myself, the first major poem in the first edition of Leaves of Grass, where he's talking about things that it seems like scientists found out were true 100 years after he wrote about them. So sure, he was influenced by transcendentalism. There's a great book called Walt Whitman's America, which just basically is about the world and universe he was formed in and what produced Leaves of Grass. That's really fascinating. So he's at the center, but it's really about what he was, taking in and what he was observing and seeing in the world around him at that time in America, very spiritual.
And he has a Renaissance beard, so it kind of does.
Very spiritual, very, very spiritual being, really spiritual.
Cool. Very, very cool. So you're going to be performing Friday night with your band at the Cape Cod Cultural Center. So folks can Google it, go to their website, buy tickets. Totally. Yeah. And you're also going to be with Steve Abado? Steve Adabo.
Yeah, he's He's quite well known. He's a producer who produced all of Suzanne Vega's albums and the hit Luca, and won a Grammy for Sean Colvin's album. And he's a great guitar player. And he plays with me a lot in my band, and he's available for that night. So he's going to come up and do it.
Very cool.
And a great drummer and bass player too. So it should be a fun night.
And my last question is, you opened for Bob Dylan. Do you want to share anything about that experience?
What can I tell you about it? It's not like you get to meet him when you open for him. You know, he's pretty much hanging in he's in the truck, you know, but we hung out with his band and, you know, stood stage side while his band performed. So we were on the stage, just watching it, hanging by the sound man, you know, and I just remember, you're just asking. So I remember one particular memory from it. It was a blast, but I remember we've done it several times. And I remember one particular memory was of Dylan coming over and bitching at the sound man. I'm like, we were like standing right there, and he walks up, I can't hear anything. He says, and the sound man's going, I have it cranked. I have it cranked. He says, you have it cranked? I can't hear anything. It's just like, I was saying, I don't want to be that sound man in that particular moment, but I do love his band. Love his band.
Yeah. And how was the audience?
And they were great. I mean, it's like, you know, we were very well received. I was very pleased. It wasn't like, you know, that George Carlin routine when he's opening for Richie Havens. I never ever heard that routine where it's like, oh, or is it Rich Little, or was it, I'm trying to remember who did that routine. There's some famous comedian did a routine about having to open for Richie Havens. And the whole time they were telling jokes, people were just going, we want Richie, you know, it wasn't like that. We were really
actually,
well
I think I did hear that on some podcast recently, actually. Yeah.
Is that right?
I remember. Yeah. It's like really ringing a bell, more than deja vu.
Yeah. No, it was great. We were really well received. In fact, then the guy that does like this big radio show in one of the towns we played in invited us back to play. Like he does this live thing and a filmed concert, which we did. And I got to, you know, that's when the start of me getting to know Tony was. And so I've been friends with Tony for a long time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marc Berger, for joining us.
Thank you, Pandora Peoples. I really appreciate you having me on your show. Thanks.
This is Heavenly Ancients Off Ride.
Walking in the desert at night, listening for the heavenly ancients, breathing in the stars and the moonlight. Wanna go way, way back. Footsteps over the sandstone, just like heavenly ancients, heavenly ancients calling me away, way back. Playing with my baby in bed, thinking about the heavenly ancients, creeping with the cars on the freeway. Wanna go way, way back. Crosstalk over the phone line sounds like heavenly ancients, heavenly ancients calling me away, way back. What did they say? I don't see. What is this crazy sight? waiting for the heavenly agents. Nothing left to keep me around here. I'm ready to go.